Strategy 2. Set up varied realistic scenarios for reasoning. This strategy uses scenarios drawn from the real world to practice a desired skill. The real world aspect requires students to transfer knowledge into the kinds of situations they might encounter in their lives. I provide an example of a real life scenario where you are playing the part of an instructional designer, and one of your stakeholders has some feedback about the writing style in some e-learning you created. This was done in Google Forms, and you will need to respond to the feedback, making choices that will lead to the best outcomes for the learners and the organization. Your scenario unfolds depending upon the choices you make. This is similar to a choose your own adventure book. The purpose of this scenario is to give you practice responding to feedback appropriately. Our activity is going to be to script our own scenario collectively as a group. So take a look at this example to see what is involved. This idea is based on activity I did as a kid. I used to sit around a campfire with my friends and we would make up a scary story, one line at a time, each person adding their own line to the story. Imagine most of you have probably done something similar. So I'll start our story off, and you will need to continue it in the discussion forum. I'll be creating a Google form based on your contributions, and you'll be able to follow along to see our scenario unfold. Hopefully by the end of the week, we have put together a coherent story. Please feel free to contribute as many times as you like. So here is our scenario. This is Bob. Bob has a boring 9 to 5 office job. Every day, Bob puts his lunch in the fridge in the lunchroom of his office. Lately, Bob has noticed some items missing from his lunch bag. This doesn't happen every day, but it's often enough to make Bob frustrated. Bob wants to find a solution to his problem, but he's unsure how to do it. What would you do if you were Bob? So the idea of this scenario is to give somebody practice behaving appropriately in a workplace when there are conflicts. And I made it a pretty simple scenario, person with a missing lunch. And the idea was because the activity is fairly complicated with us doing this collaboratively, I wanted the scenario to be simple to make it a little bit easier. So here's a flow chart of our story, and I've started it off with a couple of options. So you can see at the top, Bob is frustrated about his missing lunch and he wants to find a solution. Here's 4 choices that he can make. So option number 1, Bob decides he doesn't want to make trouble for anyone and keeps his frustration to himself. Option number 2, after watching an episode of Sherlock Holmes, Bob decides to add expired medication to his lunch in a clever attempt to see who gets sick. Option number 3, Bob files a complaint with his human resource department. And option number 4, Bob spends his morning waiting in the lunchroom to confront everyone who enters in an attempt to see if they have been taking his lunch. So you can see those 4 options that started off can branch out into many more options and choices that Bob will have to make as he negotiates his way through this story. Really only limited by our imagination. There is no end scope to this. So how can you contribute to this story? Let's say you like option number 1. You have an idea for Bob decides he doesn't want to make trouble for anyone and keeps his frustration to himself. You have an outcome that you think will lead Bob from making this choice. So if you want to add that to our story, all you have to do is go to the discussion page and just let me know what you're responding to. So here we got, hi Ryan, I'm responding to Bob decides he doesn't want to make trouble for anyone and keeps his frustration to himself. And then you're going to add your contribution. And you've put, Bob quits his job due to the frustration and can no longer pay for his kids' college. Oh no, poor Bob. And that's all there is to it. You click submit, and I will update our story with your contribution. So here you can see our flowchart again. If somebody picks option number 1, it's going to take them directly to the contribution you made, where Bob quits his job due to the frustration and can no longer pay for his kids' college. That might be the end of it. This storyline might end at that point, or there might be another option that branches off from that, or a couple different options that branch off from that. It's really up to you as we put this story together. Let's see what that'll look like in our Google form. Here's the form that I created. It's got our scenario at the top, Bob's lunch. And here's the first 4 options that I started off with. And feel free to add a 5th or 6th option or whatever you like, or just add to these. Again, it's completely up to you. So now if somebody in the forum picks the first one, Bob decides he doesn't want to make trouble for anyone and keeps his frustration to himself and clicks next at the bottom, it takes them to your response. Bob quits his job due to the frustration and can no longer pay for his kids' college. And then as of right now, you would be either starting over or quitting the forum. Now, somebody could add to this if they wanted, and that would change that. And that's the really neat thing about the Google form. It's located in the cloud. So as I update it with your contributions, there's not a different link that you have to click. You can always come back to the discussion forum and click on the link for it, and you'll always see the most recent updated version of the forum with all the contributions. Well, that was our idea for scenario 2. Set up varied, realistic scenarios for reasoning. And again, the idea of this scenario is to help teach people how to behave appropriately in the office when there are conflicts. So keep that in mind when you're coming up with your options and your responses to options. And please reach out to me if you have any questions. I know it is a little bit complicated, but I'm hoping we can have fun with this, and I look forward to seeing where it goes at the end of the week.